Let's bring in Tal Heinrich, spokesperson for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Tal, you're here in our New York studio. It's great to have you here, especially right at the conclusion of this phone call. We just heard from John Kirby wrapping that call at the White House a few moments ago. You have fresh response from the Prime Minister's office. How did you hear the call went?
It was a good call, as far as I understand. Washington and Jerusalem, we see eye to eye on the necessity to eliminate Hamas. We all want to see the 134 hostages back home, and we understand that Hamas can be no more, and Gaza can never pose a terror threat to Israel again. While we are working on achieving these war objectives, as we have defined them in the war cabinet and the unity government that we have in place right now, we all agree that there has to be minimal civilian suffering, minimal civilian casualties in Gaza, and we're working taking unprecedented steps to reach these goals, while Hamas, they're trying to do, as you know, exactly the opposite. They want to maximize the suffering in Gaza. They want to maximize civilian casualties in Gaza because they believe that international pressure could be used as leverage against Israel and let them live another day to carry out another October 7th massacre.
John Kirby, as I mentioned, is still briefing at the White House right now. You and I were able to hear some of that together. We just turned some sound. This is what he said right out of the gate, talking about this call between the two world leaders.
Why this apparent shift in policy today?
I think, look, President, well, all of us, but particularly the President, was certainly shaken by the attack on the WCK convoy and the aid workers. As I said earlier, it wasn't the only event. There had been others like that, humanitarian aid convoys coming under fire and losing people. And the President felt strongly that it was time to talk to Prime Minister Netanyahu about his concerns.
Okay. So that was John Kirby. Obviously, that wasn't regarding the call. That was regarding a change in policy. You said something earlier about the talk of change in policy, but no details of it. What is your thought on that moment?
I mean, when they refer to a change in policy, I think it's something that Washington will have to explain. Maybe these are things that were discussed, between the President and the Prime Minister. We'll have to wait and see what it implies. But I can tell you that we have taken unprecedented steps to better the aid distribution mechanism in Gaza, for instance. There's more food trucks are coming in Gaza daily than was the case before the war has begun. And we're working with international partners, if it's the aid groups or the United States, Jordan, for instance, and other countries, to make sure that there's aid reaching the civilians in Gaza by land, by sea, by air. There were airdropped humanitarian aid, hundreds of thousands of meals to northern Gaza, where the distribution is challenging, and you still have about 10 or 15% of the population in the northern part of Gaza. So we are taking a lot of steps, and it was indeed a terrible tragedy. We were shaken by this tragedy. It was unintentional. It was a mistake that followed misidentification when we're talking about the World Central Kitchen, and we're taking steps to make sure that a tragedy of this kind will not reoccur. There's an investigation underway, the findings of which will be made public, and we have set up a situation room to better the coordination between the aid groups working on the ground in Gaza. One of my colleagues calls them, the unsung heroes of armed conflicts, and make sure that aid reaches those who need it.
This was Secretary Blinken. He was also speaking live just a few moments ago. This is Brussels. He also was talking about that change in policy. Listen.
With regard to our policy in Gaza, look, I'll just say this. If we don't see the changes that we need to see, there'll be changes in our own policy.
So this is the messaging. How would you characterize this moment in the war?
You see, first, it's every moment in this war, including right now, is a moment for moral clarity. This is another moment for moral clarity. People have to understand that Hamas, they want international pressure to be applied on Israel instead of on them. And again, let them live another day and stay in power. There's a lot of talk I'm hearing about, an immediate humanitarian pause in the fighting, so to say, a ceasefire. It's important to understand there will be no humanitarian pause in the fighting, no ceasefire that will leave our hostages in Gaza and leave Hamas in power. That is unacceptable on our end.
Tal, great to have you here today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sandra.
Okay.